But really blessed today to welcome two fantastic guests as part of our Lunch and Learn series. They are with preservation specialists, and we have Mr. John Farley and Mr. Matthew Terry, our local financial advisors here in the Columbia area. Of course, they are both partners locally founded and owned by preservation specialists. Since 2004, they have specialized in helping business owners and families prepare for one of life's biggest transitions, retirement. Their philosophy is very simple. No two families, businesses, or retirement plans are exactly alike. They believe financial planning should go far beyond investments and should bring together retirement income, taxes, estate planning, risk management, and many important decisions that come with building and eventually transitioning to a successful business. John and Matthew are passionate about helping people ask the right questions, understand their options, and develop a comprehensive plan tailored to what matters most to them. Today, they're going to share some of the biggest financial risks they see business owners face, along with a few practical ideas that can help you better protect what you've built and prepare for what comes next. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Farley and Mr. Matthew Terry with Preservation Specialists. Gentlemen.
All right. Hey, thanks, Chris. Very nice. All right. So let's jump in because your business, the name of this talk is that your business is not a retirement plan, right? It can be a tool. It can be something to help you, of course, but in and of itself, it is not a retirement plan. And we'll share some of the things that we've learned and that we've seen with that. So just a quick show of hands. How many expect the business to fund at least a part of your retirement? Show of hands. Yeah. Okay, that's good. But it's not the whole deal, and there are things that you need to do just to make sure. And I do want to start this off by saying a couple of things. So this is meant to be kind of a big, broad brush. We won't necessarily get too far down into the weeds. That's how these things go. If there are questions and such, happy to chat about those. But we don't want to get, again, too far down into it because we may have to address personal things, and that's one of those issues. Okay, so let's talk about some risks. So let's follow along here. These are the first one is basically think about this. A business can be fabulous. You create tremendous wealth. It can do all kinds of things, but it's a real concentration risk if that is the whole deal on your retirement. Okay, so that's the first risk we're going to discuss. There you go. Second risk is exit planning. So a lot of times when we talk about business owners, the exit planning starts a little too late. So you want to actually back it off a few years, and there are things that you can do to make sure that when that day comes, you're in the catbird seat and you're ready to go at that time. Okay. The third risk is taxes. We all love taxes more than anything. But yeah, there are ways to be efficient about that. The way we would like to say this is we owe Uncle Sam something, but we don't want to leave Uncle Sam a tip. Okay, so that's how that goes. And then the fourth thing here is protection. All right, and we'll discuss that. So I'm going to take the first two, and Matthew will take the second two. Okay, so we'll get right on to the next situation here. So the idea of this is if you leave this meeting, it's not likely that you're going to have everything buttoned up right now, unless you're a person who actually sells businesses, right? It's not likely that you're going to have that. But the idea from this meeting is to walk away with at least a checklist and some thoughts about, okay, what can I do going forward? Take this as an opportunity, not I feel guilty about I'm not in position to sell my business. Okay, so that's how it is. Okay, so the idea is your business, in many cases, it is the retirement plan, just because there's so much invested in this. But what we want to talk about, this one asset, it just may carry too many jobs. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there's just too much going on. So first of all, it's current income. All right. So obviously that's a big deal. Now, when you talk about retirement, one of the things, now these are for non-business owners, but I think you'll understand the idea here, is that so we work with folks and we plan for retirement in our business. And many times people will come to us with a pile of money that they've saved in their 401k. But that pile of money in and of itself is not that useful. What is useful is the income you can derive from it, right? So the challenge in retirement is to take this pile of money and turn it into income, right? So that's the idea, is that you want to be able to take your business and convert that into income that's going to last you and your loved ones the rest of your life, right? So that's part of the deal. All right. Many business owners, this is the largest net worth asset that you have. And that's a big deal. This is much of your everything is tied up in this. So that is an important thing to discuss in terms of, okay, how do we take that net worth and do something with it that is useful for us for the rest of our life? So again, it's about retirement funding for you and your loved ones for the rest of your life. But yeah, so these, I'll just go back through the other areas. So again, most folks who own a business, it gives them income, significant income. It's the largest net worth asset that you have. But you plan for this, you got to turn that into future retirement funding and family security. The other thing that businesses do is they provide us with a lot of identity. That happens a lot. You're talking about, this is who I am, this is what I do. And I will also make an observation here, and this is a little off track a bit, but frequently we will see people come into the office and they'll be like, I cannot wait to retire. 6 months later, what the heck did I just do? Right? So it's an important thing. Retirement, it's really something to think through. And especially if you're a business owner, what will you be doing if you give up the whole deal? What will you be doing? Will you be satisfied? Will you be happy? This is the thing that has driven you for, in some cases, decades. And now it's gone. So it's something to consider in this whole process. Okay. Idea of the last slide, the final question was this. If your business were delayed, if the sale of your business were delayed for 2 years, how would that affect you in terms of your retirement? Right, that's an important feature. That's pretty big. So, okay. Another thing that we encounter, and you can imagine this, but another thing we encounter is the value gap. And think of it this way. So if you own a business and you have been working at this for years and years, and you put in all the sweat equity and you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you have in your mind what that is worth. That is frequently not the case, okay? But so and then you go down this thing, you go to the owner estimate, then the actual market value, and then so on after that. The way to do this is to start with, what do I need in retirement? And then you can figure out everything from there. Okay. So that's a way to go. But the biggest thing to remember is think of it this way. Like, people will come in and they will say, I have a certain amount of money in my 401k, right? Let's use a round number. I have $1 million in my 401k, right? But you don't. What do you have? That's all going to be taxed, right? Unless it's a Roth, right? Which that's a whole nother story. But if it's all going to be taxed, so you don't have $1 million. You have maybe 700,000, 750,000 in your pocket, right? So that's a big thing. So when you sell a business, there are all kinds of fees involved with that as well. And that's an important thing to factor in. So if your business is worth, again, round number, $1 million, how much are you going to walk away with? It's not going to be $1 million. That's right. And then there are certain ways to structure the sale and such, but just to give you some ideas on that. Okay. Interested in that, right? They want that to be clean and separate. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have your separate stuff. In addition, you want to set up your own, you want to have, okay, your biggest asset is your business, but you also want to have retirement accounts and such that are completely separate from that. You want to, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. Okay. Again, fund retirement plans, taxable investment accounts. You want to have assets in different places for your future. Okay. The other thing that this does is this reduces your reliance on a single buyer or a single exit date. So if you have assets in other places that can keep you going, doing what you want to do, you are less reliant on this. And again, think about this. You do not, Warren Buffett buys when other people are selling. That's the idea. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to sell to survive. You want to be positioning yourself so that when that day comes, you are you are in a good position and everything is ready to go. So again, the summary here is that the business, it can fund the retirement, and in most cases, it likely will, but it should not be the only plan. And I will share one story. I'll probably share a few more, but I will share one story. I'm working with a client right now, and he's now, he's in his 80s. He had a business that he thought was going to fund his retirement, and 20 years ago, it was about a $300,000 business. There were some shady things that happened, and he lost the whole thing. So again, if you're all eggs in one basket, this is a bad place to be, right? So think about diversify, and take the money out of the business and get it going in other investments. So, okay, all right. Most owners start the exit plan too late, okay? So when you think about this, let's just go through how this all works. Start building wealth outside of the business, certainly 10 plus years before you plan to sell. When you're talking about 5 to 7 years, here's the idea that you want to do here. Clean books. What I mean by that is this: many people who go to sell a business have books on spreadsheets. That's hard. Have a Quickens or some sort of much more professional looking book situation when you go to sell, so that you're anything that is auditable, that people can look at and say, okay, I get it, right? And also at that point, what you want to do as much as possible is when a buyer buys the business, they're not buying the owner, right? They want to buy the business, and they want the business to be running and doing its thing on its own. Okay, so you want to get the owner as much as possible out of the critical role. So in that way, you want to build team systems and stuff that a buyer can come in and say, okay, I get this. Another example. In another life, I used to sell booze. I lived in LA. I had 110 clients. One of my clients represented 22% of my business. That was bad, because now it was good. It was good. I mean, it was the top 5 busiest restaurants in Southern California. It's fabulous. You go in there and it was crawling with people. And I got Bruce Springsteen's autograph in there one time. Yes, I did. Yes. Anyway, but the point is you can have these things like concentration risk and stuff like that. So you want to make sure, okay, before you ever to sell, you want to be able to, like, for example, if you're best friends with your best client and that client represents 20% of your business, that's a hard sell sometimes to a buyer, because they'll be like, well, wait a minute, the owner goes away and so does everything else. So you got to think these things through as you get there. 1 to 3 years out, you want to finalize things like tax, and Matthew will talk more about that as we go. And then finally, your exit, you want to be negotiating from strength. So a lot of times what happens is that owners wait until they receive an unsolicited offer, they get burned out, they have a healthcare issue, they lose a key employee. All of these things are not negotiating from strength. You want to get into this from a strong position, okay? All right. And the question to ask yourself at this point is, where am I in this timeline? Are there things that I can do to improve, right? Okay. Here's the other thing that really is important, is that a buyer pays for transferable cash flow. They're not, that is exactly what they're buying. They're not buying anything else but that. So a business that is ready to sell is something that is essentially turnkey as much as possible. And the buyer comes in and says, okay, now I have the rights to the revenue. That's really what they're trying to buy, okay? Again, clean financials, that's dependable backups, everything that's audited and clean and easy to see. Back to the owner independence. You want to make sure that the owner, you as the owner, is not the biggest cog, the biggest thing going on here. You want to have customers, but you want to have everybody that is working in harmony and doesn't depend exclusively on the owner. Repeatable revenue, again, that's what the buyer's going to buy. And again, by the way, this is not to discount the fact that somebody who's worked at a business for a long time hasn't brought a lot of goodwill to that business. The buyer will buy that, but it's important to that goodwill translates into transferable cash flow. Okay. The other issue here is infrequently the owner happens to be the same thing as the key person risk, right? So in other words, an owner may be but if you have a team or some sort of cross training or such that one person is not the biggest thing that happens, that if something happens to that person, the whole business goes away. So what I would do is I would just say, just kind of see where you are in this timeline and see where you are in all of these situations. And then finally here, so I actually sold a business once, and I went to this lawyer, and the person who bought the business was kind of like, well, I don't know what you own and what you don't own. So I was changing my legal definition of my business from a certain characterization to another. And the lawyer was like, if you do that though, then you're going to send all your liabilities to the guy too. Right. So in other words, so you got to be careful when you do this. And I'm not trying to get down into the weeds, but it's important to have legal clarity on things like contracts, what you own, what you owe, that sort of stuff to make sure that you are in good shape as you go forward. Okay. There are different paths to exit. There's a third party sale. Now that's just, okay, I'm putting this thing up. Maybe a business, a company that sells businesses comes in and they give you a good valuation. You tend to get high valuations or the highest valuations because basically you're going to the highest bidder. The issue here though is you don't have control over your legacy, and maybe that's an important thing. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay, internal sale. That's where you sell it to somebody who works there, or something along those lines. Now, what happens in those cases is you tend to have to finance that situation because typically a person who's working for you may not have the cash that you think your business is worth. There's some negotiations that go on there that are maybe more involved, but that's obviously not a bad option. Family transition. This I can't emphasize enough. I'm working with a family right now. There is a guy who he has passed, and his 3 children are heirs, and a substantial amount of money. It's not, and the way it's working is that he has 2 of his children are working at the business, and one of his third child had no interest in the business at all. Now, what's really, really good about this family is that they all get along. And before any of this happened, they all laid out what was important. And the guy who ran the business was very upfront, and he was very, okay. But what I really, really want to emphasize here is that
Sounds rare.
Right. But this is the most important thing. 10 years from now, you want everybody speaking to each other and on good terms. And no amount of money can replace that, no matter how much it's worth. That is never worth it. We have seen situations where people were written out of the will and stuff like that. I mean, just dramatic, heart-wrenching, terrible situations. So whenever you're talking about a family situation, and we all come to this world with our own baggage, right? And nobody's perfect, and that's how it is. But do everything you can, everything in your power, because there will never be anything more important than your family 5 or 10 years from now. So just think about that, all right, in this situation. Okay. And then there's this other thing where you can again gradually sell your business over time, and that's something that that's again something to do. But then that has to do with, okay, how much risk am I willing to put on the table in this person whom I sell it to? Say my business is worth, again, we'll throw $1 million, worth $1 million, right? Am I willing to take $50,000 a year for 20 years, or $100,000 for 10, or what's where am I willing to go? I don't know. I remember when I sold a business earlier, this guy came to me and he said, I will pay you this much a year. Now I was moving out of the area. He said, I will pay you this much a year for the next, 5 years. And I looked right at him and I was like, so you went to a bank? He said, yes. And I said, so if the bank turned you down, I'm going to be 2,500 miles away, and this is a good risk for me. Now, maybe it was, but in my case, I wasn't willing to take that risk. Okay, so there are certain things to consider in this whole process. So yeah, all right, okay, yeah. There's no perfect exit plan, but again, just consider all of these different things when you talk about this. Okay, so here's a little checklist, and again, this is not a guilt. This is a, if you have this stuff, great. If you don't, we have stuff to work on. Make sure you have an updated valuation, clean financials and tax returns, processes that are documented, including your key goals, right? Where are you going? Management team and key employee retention. Let's just say you've had an employee who's been working with you for many years, and and you get along with that employee, and y'all groove, everything's great. If the new owner comes in, that would be important to retain that person. And so, figure out, how does that work and how do you keep that going? Okay. The other thing, customer concentration, we talked about that. Buy, sell, and operating agreement review. You want to have things in place such that, things happen. I will give you another story. Before working for the company that I work for now, and I'm now one of the partners, but before doing that, I worked for a guy, and we were in the process of drafting up a buy-sell agreement. 4 days into our relationship, he passed unexpectedly. Now, what happened in that case was he had an existing buy-sell agreement prior to what we were working out. So that's where that went. And in that process, when I was working for him, I tried to buy life insurance, and it turns out, in his case, he was not insurable. But again, these are things that you encounter, and you should have your eyes wide open in this circumstance. Okay, and that sort of thing. Okay, let's give you finally. Okay, CPA and attorney and tax planning meeting. You want to make sure that you're all buttoned up on all of these areas. Okay. All right. So it's okay if you cannot answer these things today. All right, it's okay. But the idea is that these are directions that we need to go in. Yeah. Okay.
Creating leverage.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. You want to, when you negotiate to sell your business, you want to be in a strong position, not, oh my gosh, I have to sell because there's something wrong now. Yeah. Okay.
So John talked about concentration risk, and just as he said, typically for any business owner, your business and all the sweat equity and everything that you poured into it, that is your biggest piece of your net worth. You want to have diversification outside of that. He then talked about exit planning, and I think that pretty much leads us right into taxes. The reality is, it's one of the biggest benefits that we have as Americans, right, is getting to pay taxes. It funds a number of different sources, but yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. It's not optional, right? But one of the biggest things that I want you to understand, and this seems kind of obvious, but whatever you agree to sell your business for, that is not going to be the amount that actually ends up in your bank account. I hate to break it to you, but the reality is that based off of the tax structure, based off the deal of a number of different things, you can actually do some tax planning, take some action today to actually increase the amount of money that ends up in your net pocket. And I would say that's one of the biggest ways that we serve and we help families at Preservation Specialists is, most importantly, people come to us and they're used to working with an accountant. An accountant is only going to look at the last 12 months of your life and saying, based off those last 12 months, this is what you can do. But we as financial planners, we're going to be looking forward to say, over the course of your lifetime, how do we take proper steps? How do we take proper action to save you taxes that route? So one of the things that you can do if you're looking to sell your business is you can take a hard look at your entity type, meaning whenever you go to file your taxes, are you filing it as a nonprofit? Are you filing it as a single member LLC? Are you filing it as an S corporation? Are you filing it as a C corporation? Based off of that answer, which only you will know, that is going to determine what type of levers that you can pull. Okay, so we'll dive into that a little bit further, but also, whenever you're going to sell your business, if you have hard assets, let's just say you own a building, right? If you sell part of that building as part of your business itself, it's going to change the way that part of the math works on the tax side versus just selling the right to a revenue stream. Okay. The equity side is going to be a lot cleaner. We'll talk about that in just a moment in a little bit more detail. But these last 2 bullet points is really just the timing of you want to maintain control over when you pay taxes. So I always say, you know, when it comes to tax planning, you need to be proactive. You don't want to be reactive. Okay. Whenever you become reactive, there's not a whole lot you can do at that point. Okay. So we'll dive in a little bit further. So let's talk about deal structure. You know, whenever anyone is looking to sell their business, typically they find a party. And as a seller, of course, you're going to want to sell your business for the highest possible price. But for a buyer, they say, well, I want to pay the littlest, right? I want to pay the smallest amount I possibly can. And then you just kind of work together through negotiations to kind of come and meet in the middle eventually. But one of the biggest things I want you to think about is if you are someone who owns a business and you do have physical assets that you're planning to sell, I want you to understand that this is going to be a preferred purchase by buyers. Because if you have a physical asset such as a building, you're able to actually depreciate that asset or claim amortization on your taxes, which benefits you, right? It reduces your taxable income every single year. Well, on the flip side, as you, the seller, what you actually have to do, since you've already claimed amortization or depreciation, and I am getting a little bit into the tax weeds, I apologize for that, but you actually have to what's called reclaim that. So all that previous years where it lowered your taxable income, you don't have to kind of recapture that back. And it ends up creating a very large tax bill for you. So I just want to say, eyes wide open, anytime you enter into a deal, you want to make sure you understand what you're signing up for. Okay. That's the biggest thing I just want to stress to you. Obviously, you talk to your CPA, you talk to your tax team. They're going to be able to educate you about all this. But I want to try to stay as big picture as I possibly can today. Like I said, an equity sale just meaning I'm going to share a portion of the access to revenue. That's going to be a very clean sale for the seller. So that is typically preferred to go that route. And John mentioned installment sales. He said he had the opportunity back whenever he was a previous business owner, and a gentleman approached him and said, hey, you know what? I'm willing to pay you X amount for 5 years. That is an example of an installment sale, right? You agree upon an evaluation price and you say, I'm willing to pay you that full price just over the course of a few years. Sometimes that is preferred. It does allow you to kind of mitigate and kind of spread that tax bill out over a number of years. But again, you got to do what's best for you ultimately. There's no one size fits all to any of this. That's the thing about financial planning. It is rarely a one size fits all. This earnout, this may be something to where, this terminology may be, I got a buyer. I still feel that my company's worth $1 million, and they say, no, it's worth 500,000. How can we kind of make this deal work? They'll say, I'll give you $500,000 cash, and I'll pay you that extra $500,000 only if certain revenue targets are hit or only if they're met. That's called an earnout deal structure. I want you to understand that this is certainly a benefit to the buyer, right? Because cash in hand, well, that's only 500,000, right? You may sign a contract that says $1 million, but that other $500,000 is not guaranteed. That other $500,000 is only if certain targets are met. So just want to say, I want you to understand that these are options. These may be negotiation tactics that others may be looking to kind of come to you with. But again, just come into that discussion with eyes wide open. A seller's note, this is typically going to be detailing out all the information of that installment sale. Okay. Hey, you're going to allow to sell this business over the course of 5 years. This is the financing rate, all that fun stuff. But that's just more so what deal structure really means. So for you being the seller, you want to make sure that you're taking the proper steps and making the proper decisions to minimize your taxes if you can possibly control that. Okay. I will say at the end of the discussion today, John and I, we are going to offer some time for anybody to ask questions, but I know I got a little bit more, so I'm going to be talking a little bit quicker just to make sure I keep us on time and we get out of here. But again, I'm happy to take questions once we wrap up. So while you're still in business and while you're operating, it's always important to look at kind of an annual tax plan. to see how you're doing. And I would always encourage you to work closely with your accountant, your CPA team, whoever that is. But I will just give you one example by what I mean by this. Being a business owner, you have the flexibility to kind of pick and choose how you're paid in a lot of cases. So when most businesses are started, they're started as a single member LLC. So whenever you're a single member LLC, your number one goal is to generate enough money just to pay the bills, right? I mean, there's no way that you can really take a salary just yet. But, one of the perks and not perks of being a business owner is you have to pay this thing called FICA taxes, right? Social Security and Medicare taxes. And you actually pay that twice. That's the benefit of being the business owner on your net income. So if you're a single member LLC and you're paying those taxes on your net income, if you actually change your tax structure to what's called an S Corp, you can actually pay yourself a salary, which you're still going to be paying some of that FICA tax. But at the end of the day, what's called owner draws, you actually avoid paying that additional FICA tax. So that is a net tax savings of 15.3%. Now, the reality is you have to have a mature enough business that can support a consistent salary. But that is what I'm saying as an example. You have the ability to look at your income that you have coming in to the company, work with your tax preparer, and then they will be able to help point you down the path that's most advantageous for you. Okay. So just that's what I wanted to say. It's always important, as we know, just like it is with our personal finances, right? You need to keep the equivalent of an emergency reserve, even for your company, for operating expenses and for cushion, whether that's taxes, whether that's payroll, whether that's debt. Regardless of all that, you want to make sure that you're prepared for changes in the economy. It is important, John mentioned this. We're going to go into a little bit of detail about different retirement plans to consider, but it is important to save for the future, okay? And then last but not least, it is important to continue to stay in constant communication with your CPA, your tax preparer, and that way there's no surprise tax bill come tax time, okay? That's why by looking at your books quarterly, keeping a good record of that, keeping a good eye on that is going to help ensure that you kind of know what's going on and you feel comfortable about where things stand.
I'm just curious, I know what ours is, but for a typical business, how many months operating expenses do you normally want to keep in the reserves?
Yeah.
3 months, 6 months?
Typically, that's my baseline. I always say 3 to 6 months. It just depends on your guaranteed level of kind of reoccurring revenue. If you kind of have a contract that you know without a doubt, you feel but if your income is more so wishy-washy, as in your revenue can from quarter to quarter, it can absolutely vary quite a bit, then I would say probably err on that side of 5 to 6 months. Yeah. If you feel more confident about it, then again, you could probably go down closer to that 3-month range. Yes, sir. So diving into retirement plans, there are a ton of different options. Just out of curiosity, does anyone in here have their own retirement plan through their work? Okay, so we'll talk about it and a couple that you can maybe consider adding. So a SEP IRA is one of it stands for self-employed pension plan, but it's just a retirement account. It's just the cost of setting up is very, very low. But in essence, whenever you set it up, you're just putting money in to this account. And then since you put money in, you have to go out and you have to decide how to invest it. So either A, you can manage it yourself, or B, you can actually work with a financial advisor to do that for you. There's a number of clients that I work with that are business owners. I do this for them every single year, but this is a way that you can actually reduce your taxable income. Right now, you can put north of $70,000 in a SEP IRA. But again, you can also do the same thing with a solo 401k. So again, SEP IRA, solo 401k, those are pretty similar tools. There's different nuances in it. I won't belabor you with those details or bore you with those details, but just want to say that is another option that you have. The most common, what a lot of people are familiar with, is something called a 401k plan. What a 401k plan is it simply allows you to take a portion or percentage of your salary that you earn and put that over into an investment account that's going to grow. You also, as the business owner, you get to match any contributions. So whether that's your own or whether that's your other employees' contributions, it's just a way of continuing to help others kind of continue their path towards retirement. And then last but not least, this cash balance plan is, I'm going to say it's not that popular. I would only consider this if you are just a few years away from retirement, as in like 1, 2, 3 years away, and you're looking to fork away, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. It is rarely used, and you have to fit under some other asterisks and criteria for it to make sense. But I just wanted to put it here just to say there is an option. So when it comes to analyzing what retirement plan is best suited for you, only you can answer that. Okay. It depends on your specific goals. It depends on your specific company, the size, the revenue. There's a number of different factors that go into that conversation, but this is just a starting point. Okay. So just as John talked about that exit plan, you also have a tax planning window of time. And it matches up pretty closely. So years before the exit, this is that 5 to 10 years out. You want to start taking a hard look at what's the structure and entity of your business. Do you have a retirement plan? Do you want to start a retirement plan? Right, that's for all your employees. That's a key benefit. That's to retain them. Like in the event if you were to change hands, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes into that thought. We're going to spend some time talking about estate planning and family transfer, so I won't belabor that. But before the letter of intent is signed, it is important for you, the owner, to kind of go ahead and be thinking about who am I willing to sell to, and how and what valuation am I willing to accept. That's the biggest piece to be have your mind made up about before you actually have anyone sign a letter of intent. After a letter of intent is signed, again, you're now in the meat of negotiations. Okay, how do you want to structure that sale? When do you want to receive that income? Do you want it to be paid all at once up front, or do you want it to be over the course of 5, 10, 15 years, you name it? Again, you're kind of in the catbird seat. You just got to determine what are you looking for. Only you can answer that. After closing, for maybe for the first time in your life, you now have a ginormous pile of money, and you're like, I don't have a clue what to do with this. Just as John mentioned, how do I take that beast of a company that was paying me a number of income? I now take that cash that I receive for it and now also turn it into income. So typically that's through investment strategies. You want to make sure you're factoring in all tax payments, and then obviously updating estate plans as needed. So all that stuff is, just want to say, the earlier you start planning, the more options that you have. Okay. It's always easier to be proactive. You don't want to be reactive. All right. That's the biggest thing I want you to take away from here. So I now want to talk about risk number 4, which is protection. And this is protection to yourself, your family, your loved ones, your coworkers, across the board, you name it. And the biggest thing that I really want to talk about is succession planning. Hey, if something were to happen, I can typically ask 3 questions to a business owner, and it'll tell me a lot about how much thought they've kind of given to this process. So if I say, hey, who runs the business right now? If you're not there, who runs it? Or what about who owns it? That's an important piece. Do you have partners of the firm? And then more importantly, in the event something were to happen to you, if you were to pass away, how is your family going to get paid? And based off those 3 responses, typically it helps me kind of identify if there's any type of red flag that needs to be addressed. So again, if you're the sole person that's responsible for quote unquote making all the dough, right? Well, if you're not there on Monday, is there anyone else going to be there to make the dough? Do you have anyone else you can lean on? When's the last time you took a vacation, right? So it's just a few of those things is ultimately it's going to tell you a lot about your business. Okay. I'm not trying to point anyone out or anything. I'm just saying, y'all, this is we're getting into the fun stuff. Okay. So typically when people are looking to plan appropriately for their family, to take care of their loved ones, to take care of the coworkers, they're going to do that by creating what's called a buy-sell agreement. So a buy-sell agreement is typically most commonly used to talk about in the event if someone were to pass away unexpectedly, right? Who is going to get paid and how's that going to occur? If someone is disabled, do you have a plan for that? If someone is divorced, is that a triggering event that forces people to sell out? You're right. If you're amongst partners, maybe that's something that where you don't want to get in the middle of that complexity of a divorce. There's a lot of different things about it. It's you as the business owner and you as that other partner of the business. That's something for y'all to hash out in detail. It is important to be considering what valuation method you want to use. Some people said, hey, I was Googling online and I saw where I can sell my business typically at 3 times revenue. If that buyer and you agree that that's a good metric, then go for it. right? But others, in most cases, they say, no, I want to go through a third party, an independent person that looks at those books, that looks at those clean books that John mentioned before, and then determines, hey, this is the fair valuation. And then the negotiations start. So again, you just have to figure out what valuation method to put into that buy-sell agreement, and that way there can be no more argument, right? It's written in stone, it's black and white. No one can go back on that. The most common purpose of funding a buy-sell agreement is typically through life insurance. So with life insurance, in the event if I were to pass away due to death, in that case, the life insurance will be used to, in essence, pay my family for my portion of the company. And it pretty much removes my wife from stepping into a financial planning firm that she has no knowledge about, right? So that's the purpose of a buy-sell. And then ownership transfer, again, it just gives the actual details, who buys, who controls it, and when does payment occur. So all those things, it's not a fun conversation to have. It's not a fun thing to document, but it is very important as your business continues to mature and as it grows. This is absolutely a must whenever it comes to the planning side, okay? What's the purpose of insurance? And do you have insurance? Do you, what job does it do? Well, life insurance itself, as I said before, if something happened to you, it's obviously going to provide some cash to your family. My wife and I, we had a little girl this past December, and but if something were to happen to me, absolutely, I got to make sure my wife's going to be okay. I want to make sure all our debt's paid. And I also want to make sure there's enough money left over to raise our daughter and take her at least through high school. If she wants to go to college, great. But again, that's one reason that you have life insurance. Another reason is to buy that, is to fund that buy-sell agreement. And that's also to look out for your business partners too, okay? So again, there's multiple needs and purposes of life insurance. Disability coverage. If I were to get disabled, again, I'm not able to work anymore. I know I'll be able to get on Social Security disability, but also there's certain insurance that I could take out today that would actually cover a portion of my income that I lost. So that's another reason. It's another important planning tool that I would encourage you all to at least consider and think about. Key person coverage. This is, in a way, you're buying life insurance on one specific member of a company. So I'll use, just in the sake of our company, let's just say John and I have no clue how to run a company at all. And Pat, our managing partner, he's the CEO. He's pulling all the levers to make things work. Well, if we put a key person life insurance policy on Pat and he were to pass away, what that money is more so providing is for us the ability to go out and hire a new CEO to replace him. And that way, me and John continue to do what me and John are best at, right? So it's just, again, you have to fit that into whatever is in your specific business or your specific need, but that is what key person coverage simply means, and boil down into an example. Are y'all familiar with umbrella policy insurance or anything like that? I encourage everyone that as you accumulate wealth in life, I would always encourage you to get umbrella insurance, because it's just an additional layer of protection, right? I mean, I hate to say it, but in today's world, I feel like that everyone is just looking for a handout, or they're looking to sue you over something, right? And we don't go looking for it. It just somehow finds a lot of people, unfortunately. But what umbrella policy does is it simply says that in the event you're in a car accident, you obviously have liability insurance. But if that liability insurance for your car insurance is exhausted, the umbrella policy, it steps in. So typically it's an additional $1 to $2 million worth of additional coverage. And that may only cost another $100 to maybe $200 per year. Okay, so it's relatively inexpensive for a pretty substantial amount of protection there. Okay, so I would always recommend talk to your insurance agent and work with them to identify and just bundle everything together, because that's how you get the best. But yeah, that is absolutely important. Want to talk a little bit about, this is more so of an estate planning slide, but it is important for all of your legal documents to be telling the same story. Okay, that's one of the biggest things that we talk about, is you want to think about your legacy goals. You want to make sure that you don't just talk about them, you actually go out and you actually formalize and put those thoughts down on paper, because unless there's a legal living document, it means nothing. Okay, things go into probate. things that go through the probate system, it's tied up for quite a while, and it costs money. Okay, so there's ways to avoid that, and that's why oftentimes people create trust and things of that sort. But let's just say that will or that trust, what it's really given direction to is physical assets. So things such as your home, things such as your cars, things such as your business. That's what a will or trust is giving direction to. Upon your passing, who do I want to inherit that? The operating agreement is the same thing, saying in the event something were to happen to me, Matthew, this is where my portion of the business will be transferred to and to who, and this is how it works. I would want to make sure that those two documents that I have, that they match one another. Because again, that's just going to allow for a seamless transition. Again, the buy sell, that's just more so you're documenting things in black and white. It controls the transfer and the payment time, and that's really important. The insurance, I think we've touched on that quite a bit, but obviously it creates the cash that's needed in a crunch for either family or for business needs. So a family, they can feel financially secure on paper, but they can actually lack cash when it matters most. And that's why through planning, we want to help you avoid that. Okay, it's already an emotional time. It's already a very difficult time on your loved ones as well as your coworkers. Because I know you're going to be close to your coworkers and they're going to miss you just as much as your family, but you don't want to make that time any more stressful. So take the proper steps today, get your items in order, and take the appropriate steps that's needed. Okay. So let's talk about who should you be working with to make sure that you're buttoned up, you have a comprehensive financial plan, that you feel good about where you are. So in each case, you know, typically you're never going to find a one-stop shop. You're never going to go to one person and they say, I'm an expert in all areas. And if they tell you that, then you probably shouldn't believe them. Okay. But really where John or myself kind of fall in is that we're kind of the quarterback of your overall financial picture. We understand, we want to hear your goals. We want to hear your objectives of what you're trying to accomplish. And then we want to make sure that you're walking down the right path. As we talk about your estate plan, or as we talk about your tax plan, if we see that, hey, you need to consider X, Y, and Z, we're going to recommend you go speak to your accountant. Or, oh, we're going to recommend that you go see your attorney that you've been working with. Or if it comes time to determine an evaluation of your company, again, that's not John or my expertise. We're going to say, hey, we got this guy or this company, and this is who we recommend that you go see. Now that we know a new lender by the name of Mr. David, you know, maybe we'll send him your way. Yeah. But yeah, no, like when it comes to that piece too, you're looking to finance a deal or finance a transaction. You know, you can go to a bank or a lender, and you may more so want to just make sure that you're in communication with all these key players over your financial life. Okay. So I want to ask a couple of questions before we wrap up today. And then really this is just to gauge how you feel that you are. But do you know what your business is actually worth today? Do you have a rough estimate of that? Have you talked to anyone that's kind of in that evaluation world? Do you know what the multiples are trading at or anything like that? If you're considering to sell, you may be years and years away from selling. So that number is irrelevant, right? But if you are someone that's very close to that sell point, you should know that number. And that way that's going to help you kind of get all your ducks in a row. Do you have a specific target of what you're trying to get to after tax, right? To fund your retirement? Do you have a magical number made up in your mind that you're trying to get to? As John said, you know, we want to make sure that we don't just have all our eggs in our business basket. We want to make sure we're saving money outside of our business. So are you doing that? Are you taking advantage of any retirement plans currently? If you were to get sick and unfortunately had to go in the hospital for 90 days, could your business continue? Could it run without you for 90 days? Do you have a team that can continue to make things meet, or no, does things just kind of come to a stop? Is buy sell up to date? Is it funded? Do you have life insurance coverage that you need? And is there any tax moves that are required before a buyer steps in? So again, if one of these questions, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, again, it doesn't mean that you're doing things terribly wrong. It's just say, hey, this is a planning opportunity. And this is something that I should maybe consider to get buttoned up. Okay. So again, what I'm going to say is take all the information that you've learned today through the presentation. Would certainly encourage you to just create a prioritized list to say, this is my action plan coming out of it. This is some areas that I've identified that in my personal life, I think that I need to get buttoned up on. And then you seek out to go do those things. Okay. So please make sure that you're taking the proper steps today. Be proactive, not reactive. Okay. John and I are certainly happy to stick around for a few minutes, happy to answer any questions that anyone has. But I certainly appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming and appreciate the invite for y'all having
Just
us.
had a couple things. Just want to say that I know that these are not necessarily fun conversations, that business owners want to have. But if you're a real business owner and you really care about your business, I mean, these are things that you really need to start discussing, because the reality is, I know a lot of us here are living right by the Lord, but none of us is getting out alive. So these are things, when you're a business owner, you need to take these things to heart, just whether like you're doing your taxes every year. This is something that you need to be planning on. And I feel like it's one of the most important lunch and learns that we've ever had here. So very grateful for y'all's time.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Any other questions online? All right. All right, we'll wrap that one up. Thank y'all for coming today and appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you at the next lunch and learn. Thank you.
Thank you.